interesting because I had been working on this technological capability with Wi-Fi, and I was missing something in a lot of the math and the algorithms that I was putting together. And someone said to me, "Hey, you might want to look at this." And it was this MIT professor, and it blew my mind because when I started looking at the math, I'm like, wait a minute, everything emits some sort of black body radiation. Even a spoon that you just touched with your own hand and placed on a table, with the right calibrations on a thermal imaging camera, you'd be able to pick up the level of black body radiation that spoon is actually emitting at that particular moment when you let it go and put it on the table. And I got the same idea when I started looking into, we started discussing, in the classroom, how you could literally become more energy efficient by using the energy that was being created to produce, to capitalize on a secondary form of energy that was being emitted by the creation of the original source, which was black body radiation. Just wanted to hear what you had to say on that.
Oh, it's kind of a little bit out of my understanding. So for me, black body radiation is something that I have to deal with in microwave antennas and typically any kind of outer space communications. But it sounds kind of sounds like what's going on. The black body radiation, from what you might be saying here, is always being emitted, even though it can't be accounted for by any particular thermodynamic input that was stored by
exactly.
Then is emitting the radiation. Now, the thing with currents and cables and all that is a current's just a shadow of a magnetic field of induction. So a current comes about by magnetism being basically consumed inside the conductor. So I put together, I deciphered a lot of J.J. Thomson's work on that, and I put that out on the internet. It's presently out in what we refer to right now as notebook number 4, because none of this is being described or published, but the Thomson theory of how conduction current comes about in a relationship with magnetism. Then Thomson asserts that magnetism also is a secondary, and that it's actually what he called the Faraday tubes, or the ether lines of force, which are basically electrostatic or dielectric in nature, and showed that everything basically evolves out of these tubes of electric induction, and the current flow in the conductor is an end of the line situation. Years ago I used to give the analogy is current is the footprints in the snow of the invisible man.
I like that.
Invisible man, you can see his footprints, but you can't see him. So how do you see, or we have to use mathematics and special test devices and what have you. Simple compass actually works quite well for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
To measure these things, but all this is so much more involved than this modernistic interpretation. That's what inspired Thomson and Tesla and Heaviside and all these people. Is Tesla, came right out and said that electricity is Aladdin's lamp, and that was the premise in my last presentation. Is the ether can't be pinpointed to some specific material or configuration. Exactly. The ether is what you ask the ether to be.
Exactly. It was what Einstein and Planck said about quantum of consciousness. When they all agreed this is what the outcome would be, it would be. But if there was one person who doubted it, it would not be the outcome they were expecting. It is what it is. That's that coin phrase. Last question there. Do you believe that there's like a dipole, a north and south pole, or is there one single pole, a magnetic monopole that just shifts or rotates?
With reference to, you mean the Earth's magnetic field?
The Earth's magnetic field. Do you think that there's two separate poles or just one single magnetic monopole that just shifts every now and then?
Well, I pretty much have it visualized as a pair of poles because magnetism is a closed loop phenomenon. So a magnetic monopole is kind of a difficulty, even though the Tesla transformer kind of simulates such a condition because you can have a current at one end with no return line, and you can have a potential at the other end without any reference to ground. So that makes one end a magnetic monopole and one end a dielectric monopole. So I suppose if you were to extend that to the Earth, you could have a pair of those. So then you would have to have four poles. So the Earth has a very predominant electrostatic field. In fact, there's probably more energy stored in the electrostatic field of the Earth than there is the magnetic field of the Earth, except right around the poles, which is,
okay.
If you have any receiving equipment, like these long line antennas I built where you can hear every lightning strike on the planet. I mean, this stuff's in a constant roar. That's a lot of dynamics, that's a lot of,
wow.
50 microsecond, 50,000 amp, 1 million volt, discharges, and they're at a constant rate. And then there's these auroral electrojets. So around the poles, there's a current flow of about 25,000 amps in the upper atmosphere in a big ring around the poles, which basically is a giant inductance coil. So in all probability, that's where the Earth's magnetic field originates from. This concept of some bar magnet inside of the Earth is pure garbage. I mean, first.
So do you think that
there's what's called the Curie effect, and if you take a piece of iron and you bring it to an incandescent temperature, iron has no more magnetic permeability other than that of the ether itself. So if this theory of the inside of the Earth has all this molten stuff and the temperature's all high and all that, which I don't believe anyway, but you can't have a bar magnet inside the Earth because it's too hot. None of it makes any sense. The Earth's magnetic field is generated by the electric induction from the sun, just like the light on the Earth and the heat on the Earth is generated by the electric induction of the sun. And what that electric induction from the sun is becomes completely indeterminate when you get into a mass-free environment like outer space. And then if there's no light and no electromagnetism directly, then this whole notion that it takes, 10,000 years for the light to reach us from some distant part of the universe doesn't make any sense. So it's only when it gets converted to electromagnetism does that velocity present itself. And then the velocity of light is just an abstract anyway. All it is the square root of proportionality between the total amount of magnetic induction and the total amount of dielectric induction in any given point of space. And it's not a velocity at all.
It's just static.
It's just a dimensional relationship. It just happens to be, I hit on this real heavy in the presentation before last, is how did this understanding of Maxwell and the velocity of light come about? And basically, it's just a proportionality factor that exists between the magnetic field and the dielectric field that gives you the dimensions of 1 over velocity squared, which happens to numerically and dimensionally equal 1 over the speed of light squared, but it's not the speed of light. And the thing I hope to point out in this next presentation is when you start doing transmission studies, you can get yourself in real deep trouble in your calculations, assuming that the propagation velocity is that of light in that particular medium, because the lower you go in frequency and you start getting close to DC, the propagation velocity goes down and down and down. So if you have a 25-cycle power system, like for a major electrical railway, and you're using conductors that there's no skin effect because the frequency is so low, and that the full conduction is taking part in the metal, the velocity of propagation is only about 10% that of light. And when you get down to direct current, there's no propagation velocity at all. So there's basically no theoretical understanding or justification for how direct current can even exist.
Wow.
There's all these open-end situations that just simply aren't addressed anymore. When, in the days of Steinmetz and Kennelly and Heaviside and all these people, these things were still being considered, but now it's just all gone. I don't even think I would go so far to say that electrical engineering itself doesn't even exist anymore. The stuff that I see going on in the power system, for somebody that was spoon-fed on this since the age of 6, to me is absolutely appalling. It's almost pornographic.
Yeah, I'm not an electrical engineer, and I know very little about electricity because for the past half a decade I've been dabbling in Wi-Fi and been fascinated with that, and got access to some data that I had to sign a non-disclosure for with Intel. I wanted to understand how their advanced Wi-Fi adapter worked. What did they do to, change the specific, power structure and transmission speed. And in the process of doing that, I ended up downloading MATLAB Signal Processing Toolbox, started to fool around with the adapter to literally overclock the capacity to the point where it sapped my battery in less than 30 minutes as soon as I plugged it in. But the range of the signal that I actually transmitted and received, because I was conducting, just a little small test to see how many different biophysics signatures I could capture from, say, maybe 50 yards. And I was looking out the window of my home office, and every person who walked in front of the window, I was picking up signatures. I mean, there was nothing else passing in front of the window. There was any dog, cats, or animals, or birds, or anything like that. But I had already programmed in knowing exactly what that human signature would look like, and I just wanted to see what it would do. And there was a group in the U.S. called Incutel. They actually drafted a paper behind a research paper I drafted on the university level for IT security measures, countermeasures, and it's titled Exploiting Physiological Intelligence. And it's basically the same concept. When you turn on your computer and you look at the Wi-Fi icon on there, you'll get a list of every single Wi-Fi connection that's within range of your own system. My system is the same exact way, but instead of seeing computers that are plugged in, you see people. You see the physiological intelligence signatures of people. You click on one of those, and you'll be able to read the physiological electrical intelligence of that particular individual on a biophysics level. I mean, it's just interesting. I mean, I'm having to go into all these different directions, and I just can't stay. If I were just to focus on cellular biophysics, that wouldn't be enough. I'd still be missing something. And, I'm starting to look around me to see that, things that are happening every day on the so-called physical level are giving me answers and solutions to some of the, not problems, but ingredients that I need to continue to add to this entire system in of itself, because there are certain people, what I'm finding out, that are actually developing negative health effects to the exposure of Wi-Fi.
Well, yeah, I did research on that years ago, and that stuff is not good. So
yeah, but here's the thing.
It started with basically in my childhood experience with Bell Telephone, I was taught, safety procedures and standards of exposures to those particular wavelengths, which range between like 30 centimeters and 10 centimeters, and